In it here now, I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna bid on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now with today's guest, your host, Chris Bair.
Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. We are recording from the Pfeiffer's WNX recording studio in Yankton, South Dakota. And today, my guest for the third time is Mr. Jeff Polk. Mr. Jeff Polk is joining us here today. And I know you're busy, Jeff, and I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy day and from your family to come do another radio show with me.
Oh, I'm honored. You asked to come do this, and I guess if we can work it in the schedule, I'm not going to tell you no.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I've been thinking all spring long about the collector tractor auctions that have been going on, and I thought it would be really fun to let our hair down. We both share a lot of the same interest in tractors and tractor collections and collecting tractors and trading collector tractors, and so I thought it'd be great just to have a show and as they say back in the old day, just chew the fat and talk about tractors. So what are you seeing out there in the collector market? What's going on in the summer of 2024 and into the fall?
Well, first and foremost, if you want to sit and talk about tractors, and you said we're only going to be doing this for about 30 minutes, I think we better schedule a few more hours to accommodate that. But no, that's one question probably, whenever we get in tough times as far as commodity prices, I look back on 08, 09 when corn was down to shallow $3, and the unknown of all of it. When we see at that time, obviously, late model machinery and tractors, they take a hit. That stuff is direct production agriculture, combines, planters, late model tractors. That stuff's off 20, 30, 40%. But, during that time, and as I'm seeing now, people always have money for their wants. I haven't seen in the collecting world or even the older user market with tractors anything that's 20 years old or older. If it's good, I think it's as high as it's ever been as far as values.
That really is true. And as we're the media in agriculture is just going crazy right now over the values of combines and late model first, second, third generation combines and sprayers and that late model farm equipment that is soft. But there's a part of the machinery market that still is very, very strong, and that falls into that 20-plus-year-old machinery. Why is that, Jeff?
Well, I kind of touched on, I think people just always have money for their wants. I mean, and a lot of these tractors now, you can't work on it when a solenoid goes down or a wiring harness has a problem. They have to call John Deere, and you have to wait around, and it gets very costly. If you got an old John Deere 4440 or a 4020, it's something that you can hook a batwing to or use on hay equipment. It's a user-friendly tractor, and I'm not being partial to John Deere. 1086s, we can go to all the different brands. Those are good tractors.
Absolutely.
They were kind of bulletproof, and it showed through the test of time, and they're user-friendly, and, puts a smile on your face. You can enjoy running them.
Well, you take a look at the red side, take a look at the Magnum tractors, and you see Magnum tractors with 30,000 hours that are still pulling feed boxes, and there's a reason for that. They're just bulletproof, and you can't kill them with a hammer, right?
That's exactly right. You talk Deere 50 and 55 and 60 series, that stuff's just running, and you said if you've kept it up 18, 20, 30,000 hours, and hey, they're still plugging along.
One of the things that's really interesting, if you to talk about a 50 series tractor, you take a 4450 or even a 4850. A 4850 will pull a big feed wagon. A lot of these guys are going out and buying 4850s or 4450s or even the 30 and 40 series and completely rebuilding them from one end to the other, from the top to the bottom and from the front to the back, and putting $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into them, and it's still cheaper than a new one. And then they got a tractor that they can run for another 15, 20,000 hours, probably without a whole lot of problems. There's a lot of that's going on.
There's a lot of that. You're exactly right. I mean, replacement value of a 4850, I don't know what it'd be, but it'd probably be $300,000+. And you can dump 50,000 in something, then you can run it for another 20 or 30,000 hours if you keep it up.
Yep. So as you've been traveling around to all the collector markets, and I consider you to be one of the leaders in the collector tractor market in the United States. Your family has been doing it for a long, long time. What is some of the best collectible tractors out there right now?
2 weeks ago I was out in Indiana. We sold 506 tractors in New Paris over a 2-day span. Saturday, there a week ago, I was in Waterloo, Wisconsin. We sold about 164 tractors. As people get older, the interests change, and what was on the high demand of collecting 20 years ago is different than what it is today due to the fact that all our interests changed. But this muscle era stuff is just kind of on the up and up and up. And, 20, 30 years ago, some of the older era 2-cylinders and older era, 30s models, 20s models, era-wise, that was kind of the king of the market. And not to say that it's still not got value, because it does, but where the high demand is more in the late 60s, 70s, even into the 80s,
So what are you seeing that is going on with the pre-electric start tractors, meaning tractors that could be started with a starter and a battery? What's going on with that market? The Rumleys, the Waterloo Boys, the A's and B's, and those tractors. What are you seeing in that market?
When you get into what I consider the pioneer tractors, your big Averys, your big horsepower cases, like Waterloo Boys, for instance, that stuff just seems to stand the test of time. I can't really give you an answer why, because it just seems like that's an older era attraction. But these younger people, there's just so much neat makeup of them tractors. They were so far past their time going from a horse to that I just think there's a high demand for them, and it shows when they sell. Now, when you get into A's and B's and Farmall F20s and 30s, there was a lot of them built, and that stuff maybe would be suffering for what we thought the market was at one time.
And and you're exactly right. I mean, some of those models were built not only thousands in a year, but they were built over a 5 or 6 year period of time. So there's 40 or 50,000 of them that are out there. However, there still is a market for that, because the more you have of a particular model, the more people that grew up on them, that had that experience, that are coming back into the marketplace as retired people and saying, hey, I want an old H. I want an old I want an old M, a straight up gas M that is very, very common, but yet they'll put the money into them and restore them and paint them up and make them look nice and just parade them, not necessarily for resale, but just to have it in their shed for nostalgia's sake. Would you agree?
Absolutely. As times went on, not every kid's been born around the farm or on the farm as there once was, but they can still relate to an uncle or a great uncle or granddad. And there was always an H or an M farm on every farm, or a John Deere A or B. So, and it's an affordable hobby. These hobbies have gotten very expensive, but if you want to tinker out in your garage, and you don't have to have big sheds, and you still want to go out there and wrench, and it's kind of therapy that you enjoy, it's very reasonably priced as far as that goes. I mean, if you get into vehicles or cars, tens of thousands can be spent, when we're in a tractor, you might be able to get away with hundreds spent.
Yep, that's exactly right. Folks, we're coming down to the end of our first segment of The Legacy of Agriculture. Appreciate Jeff Polk for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us, and we're going to be right back with segment number 2.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffer's.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Folks, we're back. I'm Chris Bair, your host of The Legacy of Agriculture, and Jeff Polk is joining me in the Pfeiffer's WNX recording studio talking about the collector tractor market. You know, Jeff, we had an interesting conversation before the radio show started talking about some of the muscle tractors of the area. And one of the tractors that was really interesting to me, and when I started into the auction industry in the early 90s, was the 1468, the old V8 tractors, whether it was on the Massey side or whether it was on the international side. And even John Deere in the 8850 built that big V8 engine that was in those tractors. And I can remember doing appraisals and valuations on farm machinery on some of those old V8 tractors. And you walk up to it and you go, yeah, this isn't such a shiny piece, and I'm not really sure you should have this on the farm type deal. And oftentimes on a 68 Series International tractor, you have a farm sale, you'd have a long day to get to $4,000 or $5,000 if it was tired. But now, just a few weeks ago on our Southern Dakota Pfeiffer's auction, we had a 1468 that was a very nice, well-painted tractor. It wasn't a complete restoration, but it was a nice-looking tractor that brought $42,000. And 25 years ago or 30 years ago, that was a $5,000 tractor. So tell us about that.
It appears to me that things that were so problematic back then when they came out, or were very undesirable back then, is what's driving the market now. You know, you talk about V8s, 14 and 1568 Internationals, 1150 and 1155 Massey Fergusons. They're top of the market. They really bring they bring a lot of money, and there's a lot of desire for them. And if you want to go a step farther and hydraulic front-wheel drive John Deere's, you know, the 20 series and your 30 series, even in your 40 series, they had a hydraulic front-wheel assist on them. It was a problematic problem. I mean, they had terrible hydraulic leaks. They blew seals. And if you get down to a 30-20, they were so underpowered once you put that hydraulic front wheel. A lot of people converted them back then back to the two-wheel drives for user-friendly and for value.
And they plugged up the hoses on them, and they'd go down to the junkyard, and they'd find a two-wheel drive and put back underneath them. And I don't know how many gazillions of those old hydraulic fronts that got thrown away that are worth a ton of money right now.
Correct. And, you know, you want to go even past the V8s at International with the Coleman front-wheel drive underneath them. It took 1.5 miles to turn them around. Yep. They were not user-friendly. They were not nimble, and a lot of them got converted back. Well, now, I mean, a Coleman front-wheel drive axle and drop box and drive shaft, I think, could bring $10,000 or $15,000 by itself off of a tractor. And I remember not too long ago, you know, maybe it was long ago because time's flying, but 20, 30 years ago when you had a front-wheel Coleman axle underneath a 66 series, it cut it in half on value.
Yep. You know, I'm going to go back and I'm going to date myself just a little bit, but my dad back in the early part of the 70s was all Oliver. He was an Oliver guy. My grandfather was an Oliver guy. And my dad in 1972 couldn't get the parts that he needed for the Oliver tractors. And Oliver was struggling in the early 70s with profitability and availability of parts. And we had a new John Deere dealer in town that brought my dad out a brand new 1972 John Deere 4020 power shift with a front wheel assist, 3-point PTO with 2 remotes, and the old style. I believe it was at the Erskine cab that had the split doors where on each side the doors, you know. Correct. And I remember as a little boy, my dad had gone out and put fertilizer tanks or chemical tanks on the side, John Deere. You know, they had that 4x4 tube that they mounted underneath. And I can remember my dad spraying with that 4020 with the front wheel assist. And he loved that tractor because the front end wouldn't get in the mud, you know, and it wouldn't track as well. But I remember as a little boy sitting in that tractor and just shifting that power shift up and down with the engine off, you know. And it brought back fond memories. And one day my dad went to town and he bought an 8630 4-wheel drive and he traded that 4020 off. And I don't know what I would pay, but I would borrow a lot of money to find that 4020 front wheel assist and take it back home again. I'm pretty sure it wound up in the Midwest somewhere, probably on a dairy farm somewhere. But, that's what people are collecting right now. They're collecting memories. They're collecting those nostalgia tractors that Grandpa had on the farm and that they remember riding on the fenders. I don't think you'd ever catch a kid riding on a fender of a tractor now, but I used to think that was the only mode of transportation was on the fender of a tractor.
You weren't sleeping in your bed; you were on a tractor fender. You touched on something there that you remember as a kid grabbing the power shift and running up and down while the tractor was not running, sitting in the shed, and you were dreaming and imagining going out across that field like your dad did. And then he goes and trades that on an 8630 when he probably had to give some boot for the four-wheel drive 8630. Yeah. And now you look at what an 8630 is going to bring versus a power shift front-wheel drive 4020. But you touched on one thing again. You just want to go back to the joyous time of remembering when you had that 4020 and you were going out across the field. And that's all we really we might age and we might get older and we get wrinkles and gray hair, but we're all kids at heart.
The one thing that's really odd about the power front end on a John Deere tractor in where I grew up in potato country, all of the John Deere dealers sold those. So it was a very highly populated area. And when I moved back into the Midwest 22 years ago, they didn't have any. I thought everything out here is two-wheel drive. But my dad had a 4020 with the front wheel assist power shift, a 4430 front wheel drive with the power shift. He had a 4640 front wheel drive with the power shift. And then of course the 4840, you throw that away, right? And but in the early 80s when the 80 he went to town and bought, this was his last new tractor that he bought. He bought a brand new 4850 with a mechanical front wheel drive. And my dad always said that mechanical front wheel drive would do more work and pull harder than a lot of the old four-wheel drives like the 8630. And it was right after that he sold that 8630 because the tractors improved that much in the mid-80s. And so everybody's experience on the farm is different, and I'm not really sure where all those tractors wound up. It's been a long time since I've been on the farm, but that's what people are after. That's what they're collecting for, is for those memories.
Well, when I get some time and I come off the road and I call my ranch out here my happy place, but I got a 4055 one owner with 3,200 some odd hours. I got a 4455 with 3,600 some odd hours I bought from the original owner. But I got the 4055 hooked to my Batwing. And, I know Christy looks at me a little odd sometimes. Like, she goes, "What are you going to do today? You're going to go out in the shop and work?" And I said, "No, I'm going to go get the Batwing out and mow the ditches and around." And she's like, "You really, it don't look like you need to do that." But, and the radio's not even working in the thing, but that's my happy place. I enjoy going out there, and maybe the grass don't need mowed, but I'm going to be up and down the road doing it. Just do, like I said, back to childhood, and sometimes I'm a little kid again.
You just need practice. I think what Christy doesn't understand, it doesn't matter whether the grass needs to be mowed or not. You're going to do it anyway because it's time out,
Practice
right?
Makes perfect, right? Well, I think there's a country song about tractor time or something that's just came out, and it's just that's my happy place. That's when I enjoy it, and it's therapy.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Phone's not ringing. I don't have 1,000 people looking at me from behind a microphone selling tractors, and it's just me and my 4055 and my Batwing and some grass in the open air.
That's right, or lack of grass because you just mowed it yesterday too, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun, Jeff. Hey, we're coming down to the end of our second segment of the Legacy of Agriculture, talking about the good times on the farm and the collector tractor market. I appreciate Jeff Polk for joining us. We've got a beautiful line of machinery and land that we're going to be selling all fall long at Pfeiffer's all over the upper Midwest. So for a complete listing of all of the land auctions and the equipment auctions that we've got under contract, I think, Jeff, we're a little over 60 right now that we've got to get through to the end of 2024. A complete listing of all of those, you'll want to go to our website at pfeifers.com. That's PIFERS.com, or you can simply call us at our Sioux Falls location at 605-836-2737. 2277. Nobody does it better.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Folks, we're back with our third segment of the Legacy of Agriculture. I'm your host, Chris Bair, joined by Jeff Polk in studio. Jeff, I got a confession.
I'm ready.
I think I have an addiction, and this addiction started a few years back. I talk on the show a lot about my childhood. I had a great childhood on the farm, and I grew up and I learned how to drive truck driving Detroit engines, the old 671 Detroits. The 6V71s, and then as I got older, the first truck I ever bought to haul machinery with had an 8V71 and a 9-speed transmission. Therefore, I got one arm that's just a little bit longer than the other one from shifting all the time, right, is what they said. If you drive a Detroit, you got to have one arm longer than the other.
Absolutely.
But this last winter, a good friend of mine and I went up to northern Minnesota, and we bought in all of our Super 99. And of course, the optimism of all people who rebuild tractors is that it's just not quite as bad as what you think it's going to be, and it's going to be easier to restore than what we think it is. And we got into this restaurant. We started the day after Christmas. My friend Mike. And coworker, actually, he works for us part-time. We started in on a shop on a tractor we thought was going to be as simple as squirting a little bit of diesel fuel and a little bit of oil in the cylinders, and getting this thing running turned into a complete disassembly out of frame because the cylinders had gotten full of rust and corrosion. And so we spent we spent 3 or 4 months restoring that tractor, and oftentimes I told Mike, I says, it's a good thing that we're not earning a living doing this, because we would be broke in about 2 weeks. But that particular era of tractor, it seems like in the collector world that that tractor is pretty rare, and they're a little bit hard to find, particularly with certain configurations. And what are you seeing in those tractors that were low production, maybe only built for a year or 2 or 3? What are you seeing in that marketplace in those 1950s and 60s tractors?
Well, when you talk about production, I guess there was a time when production was really the leader in the drive all of collecting, and I don't think it necessarily is now. I've sold I've sold one John Deere tractor that was one of one built. I've sold lots that are under 10 total produced. They don't bring as much as they did 20 years ago. But when you're talking about Oliver Super 99 with the Detroit, it don't matter if you're John Deere, International, Alice, Lover, you got to love that Detroit. There's just something about the muscle and the rev of that motor that would... Any man that doesn't like that probably needs to check himself. I mean,
that's
it's something. There's
right.
just something cool about it, And I wouldn't consider a Super 99 maybe a rare tractor. They produced a few of them, but they're a high demand tractor due to the fact. And they made them in a gas. They made them in a Waukesha inline diesel motor, but they're not near the demand that a GM Detroit N1 is.
You'd be surprised at how hard it is to find parts for those Detroits now. You take that GM, the 271, the 371, the 471, the 671, all of those engines, they mass produced those engines in the 50s and 60s and put them in forklifts and cranes and tractors and trucks, and anything that was motorized, that was the motor of the time because of the horsepower and the torque that it would produce. But it's surprising how hard it is to find parts for them, and it makes you wonder where all those engines went.
Well, and you look at any tremendous friend of mine, John Kinzenbaugh from Kinsey Manufacturing, a fine gentleman, but a genius in my eyes. He produced, took a lot of the John Deeres and he repowered them. Kinsey repowered them with Detroits. He said, a lot of them planetaries, the transmissions would hold up to a lot more horsepower than John Deere would produce. And you look at something in high demand, you find a Kinsey repower 50-20 or 60-30 or 45 or 46-20. That'll break the bank.
I did not know that. Why is that? Is it just the name that he generated as a result of that?
And he didn't do it in a lot of them. It was kind of limited production on how many he repowered, but we're back to that muscle era, and there's just something about a Detroit in one of those. And I've been very blessed to sell a lot of rare tractors, a lot of high demand tractors, and we've sold a few of them over the years. But you take a standard John Deere 50-20 with a John Deere motor in it, and then you sell it, and you sell one with a Kinsey repower in it, it'll be triple or quadruple on what it'll bring. But
well, those Detroit engines, not very many people know this, but actually John Deere put a 271 in a 435 John Deere for
435 and a little 440.
Oh, they did put them in the 440
is
as well.
Kind of an industrial version of a 435.
Oh, that's right. Yep, so, that's exactly right.
Those two they did, yeah.
We sold one of those 435s with a Detroit in it on our May sale at Pfeiffer's just south of Sioux Falls. And I think a guy from Clearback East came out and he says, we just can't find them. We just almost non-existent. We couldn't find one that ran. And this one ran pretty good. It was a decent-looking tractor, and it was pretty close to being all original, if I remember right. But he was just pleased as punch that he could find one of those 271 Detroits. And I'm going, how would you like to be the guy that had to run that tractor as heavy as it was?
I think that's where earmuffs got invented,
I think that's why my dad couldn't hear anything.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
But there's just something about it. You get on one of them, I guess maybe I'm just a little boy at heart, and you get me on a Super 99 or a 435 John Deere with a Detroit, and the first thing I'm going to do once that oil pressure's up is rev her up. We're going to put her to the max.
Somewhere along the line, I think there's a law that you have to take a Detroit when it gets warm and take it to the max just to listen to it.
Before I was really auctioneering and working the ring for Dad, when one of those, we'd have a drive-through auction arena back in Indiana, and when a Detroit would come through, the first thing I would do is get up on that platform, about move the driver out of his way, and just rev that up. And Dad would be trying to auctioneer, and he'd have to just pause. and the old face would get red, but the whole crowd, their hands would go up and to cover their ears, but they'd all be smiling.
Absolutely, and that's the fun part about collecting tractors and being around them, is being a part of that history and the history of the people that built those tractors. They were tough guys. Those guys that worked back in the factories back in St. Charles, Iowa, building like the Oliver tractors. That was a whole different era. They had a whole different style of thinking for sure. But folks, we're coming down to the end of our third segment of the Legacy of Agriculture. Jeff Polk is here with us. In just a few minutes, we're going to go to a radio break, and we're going to be back with our fourth and final segment.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffers. Nobody does it better.
Folks, we're back. I'm Chris Bair, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture, joined with Jeff Polk for our fourth and final segment. So I did something fun this summer, Jeff. And in our third segment, I told you about a Super 99 that my friend Mike and I rebuilt. And when we got that tractor done, we took an old Dodge pickup, and we couldn't figure out how we were going to break that engine in because it didn't have a PTO in it, and we didn't have a dyno in it. So we took an old half-ton pickup out of the pasture that still ran, and he has a brand-new concrete road that comes right up to his house. So we took that tractor out onto that concrete road, and he put that transmission in reverse, and I put that Oliver tractor in 6th gear, and I just poured it to it, and we poured black until the smoke rolled up underneath of that. I think I sent you the video clip on that.
Absolutely.
And that, I'm going to tell you, that was my second funnest experience. But the funnest experience that I had is and I don't want people to discover what we did there, but right here locally in the Sioux Falls area, every summer I believe it's the third week of July, there's the Granite Tractor Pull. And this is one of the bigger shows that's in the area. And I've never had a tractor in a tractor pull. Never done it. Something that I'm not really interested in doing it. But Mike kept elbowing me, says, hey, let's take that Super 99 down to the tractor pull. And I says, okay, we could do that. And he says, I think it's too heavy to do it because I think there's a weight limit. Well, the last weight class of that old tractor pull is 8,500 pounds. So we loaded that Super 99 on the trailer, and we hauled it down there, and we parked it clear back in the back because it runs good, but it's ugly. I mean, it's not the prettiest girl at the dance, and we sat there from 4:00 in the afternoon when it was so miserable hot, and we sat and watched tractor after tractor pulled down that track, and finally it got down. It was about 10:30 at night. And we got down into that 8,500 pound class, and that tractor weighed, we drove it across the scales about 7 o'clock, and it weighed 8,200 pounds. So we were just in that class of tractor. And Mike and I, we couldn't decide if he was going to drive it or if I was going to drive it. And I said, Mike, I says, you've done this 2 or 3 times. You do it, and I'll just go to the end of the track. But I do want to record this. And so here comes all the John Deere guys and the International guys and the Moline guys, and they all hook up on the heavy pull, and they pull it down there. And then I see Mike down there, and I can hear that Detroit clear down at the opposite end of the track with smoke coming out of the exhaust. And I'm sitting there going, I just really hope that motor holds together all the way to the end of this track, and to the end of the track. And he started pulling it, and he gave it about 2/3 throttle, and then he gave it a little more and a little more as the weight moved up the sled. And by the time he got down to the end of the track, I knew that he was not only going to win it, but he was going to win it big. And he outpulled the 830 John Deeres and the R John Deeres and some heavy Molines by about 10 feet. And he didn't even have all the coals poured to it. And I'm going to tell you, there was a charge that went through my system that I just started laughing. And that was one of the funnest things that I'd done for a long time. And of course, nobody knew who we were. We'd never been there. We didn't put our name on anything. And I was walking past the John Deere guys, and I won't tell you what they said about that Detroit engine, but they definitely didn't think that we should ever be allowed to pull with a Detroit engine on that track again, because we really made those John Deere guys look bad. But it was a lot of fun. But that's what it's all about. That's what about this collecting is about, is being able to go out to your machine shed and say, hey, I got a rare industrial front wheel assist 4020 with the power shift. And so it creates a lot of fun for families. I watch some of these tractor pulls and some of these events where grandfathers or even great grandfathers put their kid on a seat of a tractor, and they can go to a parade and show their grandfather's pride off, and that's what it's all about. And that's why these tractors are holding their value, and why these tractors are doing so well in the marketplace.
You touched on something. That's exactly what it's about. A couple things I want to touch on. It's a people that I've met. I'm so blessed to be able to auctioneer and buy and sell tractors. It's something I just dearly love. I can't seem to get enough of. But the people that I've met over the years, I consider in my auction family, and they're from all over this country. I brought one piece back for a gentleman out of Utah, and he came and picked it up at our ranch here in South Dakota from Indiana. It's just all over the country, and they became like family. Actually, in some instances, maybe closer. But, there's another thing that when I was a young auctioneer and when I started out, I did some of these auctions, and I would see gentlemen weep when their tractors are getting sold, and I just didn't quite understand it at that time. Of course, I didn't have the love. Maybe I do now, the depth of it, but I kind of question, why would you fall in love with a material object like that? It's just a piece of iron. It has no feelings for you, but but it's what you touched on. It's a lifetime. It's a fun that he had that represents his lifetime, and that piece is just his representation of that. It goes deeper than that painted up tractor, whether it be a common Farmall H or M or a John Deere A or B. He's not just looking at the tractor. He's looking at the lifetime and the joy that he's had through agriculture and through them tractors.
That, that's you're absolutely 100% right. And I really do think that that's one of the reasons why agriculture and collecting tractors and collecting some of this farm equipment is such a big hobby for so many people is they're collecting and they're trying to hang on to the memories. They're trying to hang on to generations of farming, generations of producing commodities or livestock, and I think that's a healthy thing. Now, I think it'd be taken to extreme a little bit, but also it helps keep families together, and families are the most important unit that there is ever on the face of the earth, and 100%. I think it helps keep families together. Well,
and I'm a little biased. Agriculture, it's just the tractor industry, the buying and selling machinery, the collector tractors, agriculture. It is a salt of the earth people. Those are the people I feel like I want to be around, and that's who I'm close to, and that's what we are. I'm probably a little biased to that, but I just feel like that's the backbone of America, and it's a heart of what we all are.
Well, and not only that, but agriculture is changing at such a fast pace, and I've said it many times over our show, The Legacy of Agriculture. As you go back 100, 150 years, it took 89, close to 90% of the population to feed the nation, to feed the other 10 to 12%. And now we have less than 2% producing all of the food, and part of it's going across seas. So not only are we feeding the United States, but we're feeding countries around the world. And so in a way, and I don't know if it's a good or a bad way, but in a way we're losing touch with agriculture. There's less and less people that are in production agriculture. Everybody's affected every day by agriculture because we all like to eat. But having said that, production agriculture is diminishing population-wise.
Well, it's became a corporate thing. And to survive, you've almost had to. You look at, we were selling corn for the same price in 1974 as we are in 2024, and everything, all your expenses have went up 300 and 400 and 500%. It takes a corporation to make that go, rather than the small farms that we used to, 80 and 160 acre farms that you could produce a family of 5 off of. It's just not feasible in today's world.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for joining us on The Legacy of Agriculture. I'm sure we're going to be back doing more reports soon. Folks, thank you for joining us at The Legacy of Agriculture.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bair, sponsored by Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pfeiffer's at 605-836-2277.